in their diverse problem too. Yeah, let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tigist. And we see how research is very key when we talk about gender disinformation, when we talk about countering it, or human rights. You know, you talked about advocacy, the opportunity to identify the gaps, you know, and even the framing, you know, that came from feminist research for us to say, yes, there is also a gender connotation to disinformation. And thank you for mentioning the cases, the migrant community cases, the case in Sudan. So we will come to you very shortly, but let's listen to David. And we will really be interactive, so feel free to really reflect on the conversation that is happening here. So David, you've listened to everyone speak to the cases that Tigis has mentioned, Avis mentioned, Zaituni also mentioned. And I know that WUGNET has done quite a bit of work on tech-facilitated violence and gender disinformation as well. What are the collective actions or strategy that needs to be taken, you know, if we want to counter gender disinformation or tech-facilitated violence at large?
Yes, thank you so much for that amazing question piece. Unfortunately, I had to be the one to serve after the best chefs have done the serving, but we shall just assume I'm going to give it a bit of dessert. Just to answer your question, and maybe for those that might not have been around when she did introduce us, my name is David Iribagiza, and I work with Women of Uganda Network. We are an organization, a women's rights organization that basically interests itself in understanding the intersection of gender and technology. We are based in Uganda, and like she said, we've done a bit of work around gender disinformation. For those of you that might be a bit conversant with Uganda's politics, and for those that might know our president, His Excellency Yoweri Museveni. Don't worry, he's not going to be the subject of debate today. But he's contesting again to become president, and the elections are actually going to happen early next year, to be specific, Jan. And interestingly, his campaigning slogan for this election is going to be protecting the gains. So that is why I interest myself in protecting the gains, but this time around to bring it into a feminist, perspective. Why? Because I want every feminist, every women human rights defender right now to just give yourself a very simple hug and congratulate yourself for, the gains, the work that you've so far done, because there's visibly some, results of the work that you've been doing over time. Over time, we've seen a bit of now, for example, affirmative action in the Ugandan parliament, where we saw the introduction of, for example, the women members of parliament, a slot that is reserved for every, constituency to make sure that women are properly and efficiently represented in parliament. So those are some of the gains. But then we see gender disinformation coming in to actually rip apart some of these gains. And gender disinformation happens to be, let me call it a vice or a form of violence that purposely targets the credibility of women in society. And by that, I don't even just want to limit it to female journalists, but I want to just broaden the scope and the perspective to just look at women in media, because we also have, for example, the social media influencers, whom I'm very sure you've seen playing a very big role in most of these electoral processes. I'm talking about, women in politics. It does not even necessarily have to be those that are standing, but there are quite a number of people that are right under them that actually play quite a number of cards to make sure that these people, get into power. So I've been listening to all their opinions, and indeed you can see it has become quite the threat. In Uganda, we've seen so many journalists. Sometime back, with the support of APC, WUGNET was in a position to carry out a research, and we did actually make a report from it on gender disinformation, where we made an attempt to basically understand the status of gender disinformation. Yes, of gender disinformation in Uganda. And we clearly did realize that there are quite a number of cases, okay, that ideally did point the fact that it was actually ripping apart the gains that we had gained in most of these fields. We came across, people that we did talk to now, for example, a popular, journalist who interests herself in matters of democracy. She's actually around, for those that might have seen her, by the names of Agatha Athe, whom on so many occasions, a lot of disinformation has, for example, been spread about her, claiming that she has multiple partners, something that should not be of concern to us, right? But that will basically divert the public's attention into concentrating on matters of her private life, as opposed to the kind of critical information that she's putting out there. But then, just to bring it closer to answering the question that you did put forward to me on the kinds of collective actions that we can actually take as civil society, as non-state and state actors, the first that I think we can take on is evidence-based feminist research. And for that, I say that because for as long as we do not research this field, for as long as we do not research the vice that has become of gender disinformation, it only remains a myth. It will always be recognized as just a few isolated incidents, yet in actual sense, it is something that is tearing down women and that are in media and politics. So it is only important that we continue to conduct as much research as possible, because at the end of the day, research will inform so many other interventions. It is going to inform, for those that may be interested in litigation, it will inform litigation. For those that may be interested in doing capacity building, it will do the same for you as well. For those that are parliamentarians, it could also as well inform the kinds of policies that you're eventually going to come up with. Then additionally, I also think one of the other actions that we could also take on is trying to promote platform accountability, because they have a huge role to play when it comes to countering disinformation. And I'm glad we have a couple of people who have actually taken on such actions. Maybe my friend could just wave at you, Raymond. Yes. So Raymond is one of, I think, the 4 parties that did drag Google before the Data Protection Office, the Data Privacy and Protection Office, just a few months ago. And their question was, Google seems not to have been registered, okay, as a data collector in Uganda, but then we couldn't deny the fact that it was collecting information from the people, and they actually did win the case against it. Of course, he still has an appeal that is going on, because he was partially not satisfied with the decision. But then the Data Protection, Privacy and Protection Office actually did acknowledge the fact that Google was actually in breach of our regulations and of our laws in regards to data protection. So eventually, why I'm bringing up that example, it's because sometimes we have to, in addition to inviting them to the table, we have to sometimes try to enforce it as well. Make use of the laws that we already have in place to see how we can try to, close some of those gaps. So we have to look at it in the aspects of, for example, when it comes to like content moderation, like people have continuously flagged off something as false, but then these social media platforms, for example, are not taking in an effort to bring such content down. We've seen instances where if content has been, for example, put in local languages, it will most probably not be put down, because most of those tech companies have not in actual sense put in-place mechanisms or content moderators that can, in actual sense, understand most of the local context within which such information is being dispensed. Just a few days ago, for those of you that pay attention to, social media and how it runs itself in Uganda, just some time back in Uganda, we had a picture. A certain lady did post her picture on X, okay? So in this picture, she actually did, so she was putting on just a simple dress, okay? One might call it short depending on what they consider short, okay? But then she actually made an effort to put a big sticker around this area, around her thighs, okay? So that her image is not in any way manipulated for anything else, right? But then one very no-sense co-perpetrator actually does come to her picture in the replies, mentions Grok, at Grok, kindly remove the sticker. Guess what Grok does? Grok actually removes the sticker. So that actually trended, and then to make it worse, people actually did confront Grok. Grok, do you know this is a violation of one's rights? Do you know this is a violation of the law? And Grok actually put up a legal argument to defend itself that in actual sense it was not in violation. But of course that is subject to debate. So I'm just trying to say, when there is lack of platform accountability again, you will see such things also coming up, creeping up during the forthcoming elections. Before you know it, that is being used against female politicians. Someone is probably saying they have put out their intimate pictures, yet in actual sense it wasn't the case. Just to then try to wrap up a bit, again, like I had said, we also need to advocate for, rights-friendly or rights-based or rights-respecting policies that at all times we must try to challenge them. And by challenging them, we have to first even try to apply those that are already existent. And I'll make mention of, for example, the Parliamentary Elections Act, and then the Presidential Elections Act, which basically govern elections in Uganda. Now, those acts seemingly make an attempt to address aspects of disinformation, whereby they criminalize and prohibit intentional or negligent publication of false information that could injure another's reputation. But the lacuna with these laws is that they do not in any way, bring out the gender perspective of it. They do not take it into consideration that this has disproportionately affected women and girls. And for example, as a penalty of that, it only puts a penalty of 60 when you convert, $68 US. Come on, that is an amount any politician is capable of paying. So I think we also need to push for the amendment and revision of these laws to make sure that there are laws that work for us. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, it's working. Yeah. Thank you for these reflections and also pointing out some of the cases that you've had that are some of the cases that are happening in Uganda and that you've dealt with, and also the importance, of research. Platform accountability is definitely something that is really key, and rights respecting policies. So let's come to you. Let's hear your reflections. Any comments from you? It could be a question. It could be, you want to just share something that is happening in your country or in your community that where you work. Any reflections? Yes? Yes.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Janine Deselas. I recently concluded my PhD about the use of social media by feminist organizations here in Namibia. Been living here for 7 years. My question as a researcher would be where to start raising awareness for gender disinformation. Because here in Namibia, at least, we've had a report in 2021 that was launched by CIPESA together with the Internet Society. And in that report, it actually says there is no data available about online violence against women in Namibia. So everything is based on secondary sources. And this, I think, might be a major problem to getting people to understand that this is an issue. If we don't have the data, how will we convince people that it's actually important to learn, for example, local moderating forms? Because sometimes I might not be able, certainly, to even assess what is gender disinformation if I'm not speaking the language, not understanding the undertones of some comments that might be below a post. So my question to you as experts would be, where do we start? Do we start by pressuring governments and social media platforms, which sometimes doesn't seem so successful in the past? Do we start by educating people in the communities where we live? Or do we start by first gathering data? So I know probably it should all happen at once, but if we have to choose, what would be your recommendation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other person who wants to reflect? Oh yes, you could just help me give. Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, I am from Malawi. I think the issue of gender disinformation is coming from the cultural backgrounds that we have. I was looking at our platforms in Malawi, where we have some musician, for example, a lady musician, who moved out of Facebook or social media because she felt that there were a lot of attacks on her as a human being, and it all goes down to the cultural setups that we have, where most African societies do not really look at women as people who are supposed to speak out on issues that are happening in their society, and they are usually bullied online. It may not necessarily be disinformation only, but issues of body shaming, for example, where we have a spokesperson of a particular party in our country who receives a lot of body shaming issues online. And then when it comes to women commenting on politics, they are also usually, they usually face a lot of attacks from men who are online. I think so. I think the cultural issues also have to be debated on, and see how we can move forward.
Thank you. And then we have Helen there. If you want to speak, Helen is right behind them.
Good morning. Stand up. Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Stole. I'm with the Media Institute of Southern Africa, Zimbabwe chapter. So as a media-centered organization, what we've also realized, adding to what Moses has said, is that gendered violence online targets female journalists. And also in the newsrooms, they are given soft beats. They're not given hardcore pieces. So we see that even if they're given hardcore pieces, they are targeted based on stereotypes. They are questioned in as far as their qualifications or political affiliations, something that we don't see being asked of their male counterparts. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. And the panelists want to reflect, but if you can just show a hand. Yes, we have Sylvia there. Let's hear from Sylvia, and then we can hear from the panelists and bring it back again.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sylvia Kare. I work for an indigenous community called the Ogek in Kenya. And we recently did a research to investigate the impact of online violence on indigenous environmental rights defenders. And I would only like to ask the panelists, how is it like working with women defenders? how are the numbers? Because from our research findings, we found that we have like only 35% of our target population being women and the rest being men. How is it like, and how do we get women to stop fearing being on the online space to advocate for the rights of their communities? How do we get them to stop fearing being there? Because like my colleague here had said, the traditional beliefs in the African system is to let women just sit and let the men lead. That traditionally they are not supposed to give any, to make any decision or to give any views in, say, in a meeting or anything. But in the current age, we want women to be loud, like they're supposed to be. So how do we encourage them? Where do we start, especially for an indigenous community like ours?
Okay, we can bring it back.
Okay, responding to, sorry, I forgot your name, and Sylvia. So we need to simplify the language. So I also am part of a local community. I also work with local communities. So one of the challenges was the language is too technical. So you come with misinformation, disinformation, what does it mean? So in simple terms, it simply means gossip and rumors. So the starting point should be to simplify the language, to simplify the terminology, to speak the language that the local communities understand. That way you can then push for women to participate in those processes.
Thank you. Do you want to take
I'd like to
it?
add
Yes,
on that.
please.
So also, I'd like to add on that where to start. You can start by building capacity to those groups of women, but also specific women journalists, because they are the one who are responsible for transferring knowledge to different groups basing on their work. So the good place to start is to start with the capacity building. And then after capacity building, you can continue with the collecting evidences. So it can be like a research-based evidence whereby you are using the community to document the incidents which is going on within the community, and then later you will get the data as you are looking for on the gender disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, David.
Yes, thank you so much for your questions. The first one that I'll make reference to is the one on where to start. Personally, in my view, would be to begin with evidence-based research first, because it is again hard to counter an enemy you do not know, one that you do not understand, and that is why I'd said, if you do not have research to clearly point out how intense gender disinformation or online gender-based violence is, then eventually they're just going to look like a few isolated incidents. And we actually had a member of parliament from Uganda yesterday that clearly put it out there, that sometimes without clear research, they only look like just a few isolated incidents. And you can tell that from that, you probably might not get a law that works. Then secondly, I also wanted to talk about the bit of how, just address the question of my colleague at the back in regards to how it is working, how it is that we are working with women human rights defenders, given the fact that maybe in their country there might be few as compared perhaps to their male counterparts and the likes, and how best are we doing to protect them. I think in our quest to, protect our fellow women human rights defenders, it's only important that we first bring, let me call it the battle, to actually those that we assume, those that we know are actually perpetrators. Because building the capacity of a woman human rights defender in terms of their resilience, while the resilience of the perpetrator is actually also growing, at the end of the day might not make any gains. So I think it's about making a collective action, making sure that we target, be it the perpetrators, be it the victims, be it the women human rights defenders, to make sure that at the end of the day we create a safe and inclusive internet for all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Also coming back from the concern of our lady from Zimbabwe, I think there is some initiative put in place by organization in Uganda policy, putting in place community of practice, women, different profile, and that can be a space to discuss, to receive capacity building, a sort of learning talk, discussion, talking also about policy. I think that is some best way, some better example for we to follow. Coming back to the data, I think by documented most of the case, give us enough, let's say, resources to put in place or to report and get some more data, please.
Thank you, Avis. Tigist, do you want to reflect?
Yeah.
And we will have another round of questions, please. So.
Yeah. I think where to start is being respond, I think, very well, so I don't need to get there. Except to say that in terms of trying to understand the language of the community, because one of our discussion within the Safety for Voice pre-event was that some of these harassments are done through a local language that doesn't easily get picked up by the algorithm, unless otherwise there is someone from the local community reporting back and saying like this has happened, and then if the platform organization is interested, and then they can take it out. If it is money profit making, they can keep it, because in the Tigrayan war, that's what we've seen. You keep on reporting and they don't pick it up because they know that it's generating traffic. Generating traffic means profit, which goes back to a platform accountability. So when are you practicing the community practice law that you have put forward to take accountable as a platform? When are you? It's very subjective for these platforms based on what generates money. And so knowing the language would be very helpful in some ways. What are the language that is being used in the platforms, and then how do people interact with that kind of understanding? Because language is in many ways, it represents culture, it represents philosophy, it represents practices and values. And so there's something that one can be put up. But I also, again, concur with Shamiso's provocation here, that maybe also to not be too academic about it, coming from academia myself too. There's something about really trying to understand how people feel the pain or what their story is. I think oftentimes this kind of thing starts from the story of the person being harmed. And then it gets to theorize and it can in the sky, and that happens all the time. But I think if you stay with the story, if you stay with the person who is being experiencing the pain, I think it starts there, really being showing up for that, apart from what needs to be next. Engaging with governments is very important, even if we know that there is a very little interest in the ways in which they engage with such issues, because one of the perpetrators of these things are governments. It's always amazed me how we know it, but we don't name it. The governments are actually one of the violators, because they use the platform for their own purpose in terms of propaganda or even using misinformation, disinformation to discredit politicians and all that. So there's something about putting the government in the place. So having a conversation with the government is very important. Educating our people, obviously, it's very important, but what to educate with is also needs to be discussed within the community. And that would be it. But I think for me, again, what I see is perhaps we have to, earlier also I've tried to mention that we need to push the idea of misinformation, disinformation, or gender misinformation to a little bit away from the known subjects of our conversation. There are politicians, people in the media and other, and really see into what is happening in our communities, and also to try and see beyond social media centered narratives. For example, we've seen there is famine in Sudan right now. But the report says that there is famine in Sudan. But the famine is happening not only because of natural causes, but it's also because of the war that is happening there. And that in itself is misleading. It makes it look like it's a natural disaster. It is not. It is a man-made issue here, together with the natural thing. I think we have seen that also in Palestine. And the same thing I have seen in the Tigrayan war, where the blockage of food to be provided for the people were really narrated in a very nationalistic perspective, but in shaping the ideologies and people's perspective around how or where to stand when it comes to human rights conversation. And so there is so much that needs to be discussed here beyond social media centered analysis, because then we do a disservice to ourselves around understanding the macro level of the issue, and also how impactful it is when it comes to geopolitical conversations in the continent and outside of the continent. So my contribution here should be, and I would like to say that it should be really, let's try to expand this thing a little bit further so that we could see the spectrums of its impact on our people, on an everyday people, on a professional people in the media or politician and other people. It has to be as inclusive as it can. As best intention as we are, sometimes it feels like we are excluding and engaging exclusively on events that really are easier to look at misinformation, disinformation. Either it's election, either it's women politicians, or media people. And another community that we don't pay attention to, that we need to put forward also, is the LGBTIQ community. Ethiopia is going through, again, 2023 was one of the cases where we've seen a huge backlash against the community, and then now we're seeing it again. Again, it's being used with misinformation, disinformation online, and people have to migrate for their life. Those kind of things need to be in the room also, I think.
Thank you, the panelists for their reflections, and also the reflections that came from the floor. We want to open it up a bit again, just to hear more. More people got in. Yes. Okay. 2 hands. 3, 4. Wow. 5. Yes. We said it would be interactive, so that's what it's going to be. I think Shina's hand was first, and then yes, and then it's right here. I hope it will. Yes. Just for the people who walked in, we are discussing gender disinformation. I think Shina's hand was first.
It's on now. No, it's not. Hi, everybody. Good morning. It's kind of early for us, some of us. 8:30 was a test, but we're hanging in there. Thank you so much for this conversation. Not really a question, just a small reflection, which often it's not an easy thing to say or hear, but we are also part of the problem. And we are part of the problem because I was reminded very recently that when we had like massive political paradigm shifts in the world, we did not have work plans. We did not have log frames. We did not have funding. So I feel like what in some spaces we call the NGO industrial complex is deeply complicit in preventing us from collectivizing our efforts, because you have your singular mandate and you want to follow your singular mandate. And if I can think of a very recent example, 2024, June 25th in Kenya, there was a popular uprising by the youth and many people, what has now since been called the Gen Z protests. And the most visibly absent in this space were the NGOs. The NGOs said nothing. contributed nothing. We contributed as individuals, but as part of the civil society, our absence was so loud. So even in terms of thinking about why we're here and what we can do, it is also, I think, important to have a certain degree of introspection that allows us to step outside of this very, very siloed way of doing things. Nobody cares about gender disinformation because people don't care about gender disinformation, except the people that care about gender disinformation. Yeah? And it's like in a sea of 100, it's gonna be 6. So people will not come together to solve this if they don't see it as a problem. But you will not see it as a problem if you step outside of your local access box. Because if all you care about is local access, without caring who is accessing the internet, caring what internet they're accessing, it's a zero-sum game. So it's just a moment of reflection. Yeah.
Thank you, Sheena. Let's have her.
I'm going to sign. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for welcoming me to this panel, especially the discussions that we've had yesterday. It was mainly about technology. We've discussed very, very short terms and terminologies and different ways we can be inclusive when it comes to technology. And for us deaf people, it is kind of difficult because many of these terms we are not familiar with, like ChatGPT, AI, Meta, these things that were being discussed. So we had to go back and do a bit of research. When I tried to disseminate this information to my colleagues and my friends yesterday, I had to sit and do a bit of research as well and think, what do these terms mean? What does ChatGPT and Meta, what do these different technological terms mean? So it's important that we also try to send out information pertaining to technology, to send it out to the deaf community, because these are terms many people are not familiar with. Communities such as deaf people, we don't get this kind of information because of the exclusion. It is so, so difficult in a deaf community. Politics, all these politics, sometimes we think they are boring, but they don't create awareness, especially for us in our communities. Information is key. Namibia especially needs to work on creating awareness as it comes to informing others. Whether it's the president or campaigns, especially when we have our main political parties, we don't necessarily try to get involved and we don't really participate. Why? Because these are information that are not for us. It's not made available to us. It's difficult for us to participate. If there is something that is interesting happening, we will want to participate. We want to be part of it. We want to be part of the people who can share information. So we want to also, please, include us. Thank you very much. Her name is Toini. Toini Nekundi. Toini Nekundi.
Thank you so much, Toini. Another hand was it Florence first? And okay, so Florence first, and then we come to you. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Florence, and I wanted to ask about. We talked about the resilience of the activists vis-a-vis the resilience of the perpetrators. So, what is the response of the perpetrators? Because I understand that even the perpetrators are sometimes misinformed about whatever they are doing. So, when we check them, what is their response?
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriel, and I work with Tech Societal. I'm from Nigeria. This is just reflection and a bit of comment, also recommendations there about some of the conversations we've heard and what we do. So I just want to make comments around working as civil societies. I think one of the things I'm going to say is that we need to work more together, not as silos. I want to take examples as from one of the issues we saw. Talked about things around Grok on Twitter, and about 2 months ago, we also noticed that in Nigeria. And one of the things we did was to, we know that this is perpetrated on social media, so we have to use social media to also make the communications back for awareness purpose. So we did not work just as an organization. We had to look for activists, we looked for policy analysts, and we did a short video about the issue. And to our surprise, we never run ads for the video, and videos over 100,000 people saw the video, just in terms of raising awareness. I just want to say that many times when we work, do not approach this issue by yourself alone. There could be other people within your community that you can work with to create conversations, just to push the narratives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One last question. Yes. Oh, yes, you had a hand before. Thank you. Okay. The two of you. Yes. And then you, Yaslin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the esteemed panelists. It was very informative submissions. My name is Galila. I'm from Ethiopia. So my question also goes to our esteemed Ethiopian colleague. I'm a programs personnel specializing in human rights, particularly in the areas of women, children, environment, youth, etc., but also IDPs, right? So unfortunately, a sentence that I've been repeating to myself and others is that one of the easiest things to do in Ethiopia is gender-based violence. But now I think there's a lot of, not now, but over the years there have been very aggressive, in a positive sense, push towards legal reforms in punishing GBV and protecting survivors, right? So in this process, of course, I've been involved, but one of the critical things I have seen, unfortunately, is that the stories of survivors are not preserved and protected over the years. And I've been playing around with this idea in my head while you were discussing all of the issues, especially with regard to vulnerable groups. And I'm thinking, how can we best use technology to preserve and protect the stories of survivors so that they can be stories of resilience for the next generation? Secondly, one of the challenges our community faces is that there is this hierarchy of human rights implicitly embedded. So issues of the internet, issues of freedom of expression, opinion are like considered to be matters of luxury, right? I'm pretty sure it's pertinent to other African countries as well, but it's very rampant in our community. Before, with regard to like physical abuse, women survivors would be asked for very like blatant evidence to prove that they've been violated or harassed. Now there's an issue of TFGBV. So I'm wondering, how can we actually capacitate our judicial bodies and legislators and other law enforcement bodies so that they can actually stand on the side of the most vulnerable communities and enforce the law, right? Linked to this, however, my third question would be, one of the most excluded communities in Ethiopia are IDPs. And I've physically worked with IDPs across IDP camps. And I've brought in a lot of trauma back to my own home. And how can we discuss about TFGBV where they're not even included in the internet space, especially in Ethiopia? So these are my three questions. I hope they're not too long. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's have... anyone wants to say something, because we will close now and come back here. But I would be happy. There's someone else? Only, yes, I know. I know Yazin will speak, but I was just checking if there was someone else. Okay, so Yazin, after you, we have Penny. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the panel for your deliberations. and for everybody who has asked the question, because they're all like points to learn. And for me, as a person who, oh, by the way, sorry, my name is Yasmin Ahmed, and I'm from Uganda. And I like to say that Uganda is one of the countries that has truly, truly normalized online violence and weaponized gender disinformation and misinformation. So one, I'd like to say to the people in this room, there is a thin line between being a perpetrator and being a victim, because a victim can then turn into a perpetrator, and we need to always remember this. And two, we tend to always think that the perpetrator is a fixed gender. That's not how it works, because usually when we're like, no, it's women who are suffering and the men are doing, that's, no, some of the biggest perpetrators are actually fellow women. So something else to say. One, I like the statement, the Mark Twain quote that says, a lie will travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. So when it comes to gender misinformation and disinformation, this is extremely, extremely important to note, because by the time you come out, because the only way to challenge misinformation and disinformation is with facts and truth, but how do you go about it? Okay, because by the time you come out with these facts and these truths, damage has already been done, and we're trying. So when it comes to this type of support, how I would like the panel to explain, if they have handled something along these lines, how have they gone about it, so they can inform us, like, okay, is there something that we need to look out for? Is there possible, strategy you have used when it comes to disseminating these facts or helping, the victims? And then to, I even mentioned this yesterday, I like that we are always advocating for inclusion of our culture and our languages. And we love our languages so much, and we want local language content. But language and culture has now become a tool for abuse. Okay, I'll give you an example of Uganda. You will find that if a perpetrator wants to, commit hate speech or, misinformation, they know what they're doing is wrong, so they switch the language. They'll even tell you, you know what I'm going to say next, I'm going to speak it in Luganda. Let me speak in my language. Because they know the AI or the content moderator won't be able to pick it up. And because they can't pick it up, it stays on. Even if you reported it, it's not going to go off. So regarding something like that, maybe you could provide some, advice in that direction. And also, some misinformation and disinformation is very locally, it's very contextual to the local area. For example, you might find a specific image is normal to everybody else, but to that local context, it is insulting. Yet, if you do make a report about it, if you do try to get it taken down, it's very difficult. You can't even explain it. I think one of the I've had conversations with David, and he will tell you that one of the things we have this there's this image of the woman who is clapping. To everybody else in this room or even around the world, that's just a normal woman clapping. But every Ugandan knows exactly what that image means, and it's not a good meaning. So things like this, how do we handle, stuff like that? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Let's have Penny, and then we come back. Thank you, Yasmin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Penina Igaga, and I'm from Uganda. I'm a lawyer by profession. And I just want to ask, give me a nod or a shake of your head. How many of you think these are women-related issues that we are discussing here? Yes? No? Okay, just something to think about. Because this is a conversation that I had with someone as I was walking out. They peeped and they said, oh, what's going on here? There's so many women in the room. Okay? Yes. So what am I driving at? We are, and I believe it's something we've been discussing here, but worldwide capacity building on some of these issues is really being downplayed. So many matters in court are brought up, and some judges and magistrates will make rulings or decisions, and you question whether there's a point of humanity that has been, thought of while giving this ruling. Now, we have so many trends, so many changes that are happening in the tech and AI space, but the people, the law enforcers, are they being equipped with this information and how to handle this information? And so the comments that are made in relation to capacity building on gender disinformation and misinformation is key. It's important that even, there's an assumption that after years of law school, after years of giving judgments and rulings, it is an expectation that it will come naturally, but it doesn't come naturally. And so for me, my call is to just keep on the capacity building front. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Penny. And so, yes, Sandra, thank you. Let's clap for Sandra for moving the mic for us. Who wants? Okay, we could just go. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. So the panelists will reflect on, give comments on some of or answers to your questions, or reflect on them more as they also do their last shot. We started late, but we managed to have a good conversation, I believe. So let's just hear your reflections on some of the comments and reflections that also came from the room, and your parting shot, really. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peace, and also thank you all participants for the wonderful comments and reflection based on our session here. So actually, gender disinformation is not an issue of a specific gender. So it's for all gender, male, female, and even other genders. So we need a collective effort in countering the gender disinformation challenges. Especially, for example, I come from Tanzania, and I'm representing Tanzania here. So, for example, now Tanzania, we are heading in election, and we are having a lot of female candidates in presidents, but also in members of parliament. So you can see that we have a lot of like sexism, kind of gender disinformation, but also we have a lot of family attacks, gender disinformation. And we saw that the only solution there to counter these kind of narratives, we need men to be engaged, and we need men to counter these kind of narratives, especially when it comes to like a family gender disinformation, but also sexism kind of gender disinformation. So we need a collective force from both genders so that we can counter the gender disinformation challenges, especially during the critical election moment from where I come in Tanzania.
Yes, thank you so much for those amazing questions. Firstly, I will address the comments of my colleague Shina and Yasmin, because they are more or less related. Yasmin did make a point that there is a very thin line actually between being a victim or a survivor and then being a perpetrator on the other end. And Shina also did make mention of the fact that sometimes as civil society, our inaction actually becomes quite worrying. And I kid you not, our inaction actually does make us perpetrators as well. So it is actually a center of focus and reflection that as civil society organizations, we need to take on, that every time we stay quiet, we actually become one of the perpetrators. Then the other point that I also did want to make mention of was, I think it was a question from Florence in regards to the resilience of perpetrators vis-a-vis the resilience of women human rights defenders. And indeed, you raise a valid question in terms of whether these perpetrators actually in actual sense sometimes change. And again, this is where I bring in aspects of accountability, that sometimes much as we go ahead to do the advocacy where we actually ask people to take on these actions sometimes against these perpetrators, I have oftentimes witnessed so many cases of selective application of the law, especially in Uganda, whereby chances are very high that if a case of disinformation is actually going to be pursued by the prosecution, chances are very high that the victim in that case is of a very high profile. It is most probably going to be the president of Uganda. It is most probably going to be the Speaker of Parliament. These are mostly the cases that you see being pursued. And in most cases, they're not even pursued to the end. Just a matter of throwing the person in jail for a few days and then they release them. But then, for lack of a better term, let me say the common citizen, in most cases, you find they are not being taken care of. Then aspects of judicial activism as well. The mere fact that it needs to be backed up by continuous legal education. If these judges, if these magistrates are in actual sense not built in terms of capacity on some of these issues, then we are bound to have judgments that do not actually address these issues. Then finally, as my parting shots as well, as I conclude, I think as we continue to do this advocacy, it's only important to acknowledge the fact that for as long as we have laws that do not expressly spell out, that do not expressly address gender disinformation, it will only be a promise that was never fulfilled in terms of our activism. That for as long as they are never passed, for as long as our parliamentarians do not pass these laws that actually spell it out and address it, then it is actually going to continue to become a living experience of the people that we serve. Thank you.
For me, my parting words would be accessibility, inclusivity, and simplicity. So who has access to the information? And I would want to think for my context back at home, I think Zimbabwe is one of the countries with the highest, most expensive internet. And I'm thinking of the rural communities, they still don't have access to that information that we're talking about. And then I also want to talk about inclusivity, reflecting on what Tony said, to say we're speaking of all these very technical terms, AI, what does that even mean? So let's try and simplify the language. And also looking at my colleagues in academia that are doing the research. So we know in research, yes, you, you have to work with those terms, but how can you then simplify it for everyone else to understand?
Okay, thank you very much. I think for what we have been saying here, for my own point of view, we need a clear law and role so that one should be confident to know the difference between the real facts and the lies. And also building skill, and this starts from the home with our child. Most of them are involved in this topic. So and start also the primary school. There is a lot of work to do in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, and we can have you, Tigist, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because it's very personal, I'm going to start from the Ethiopian conversation. Thank you, Gailaye. Thank you. Yeah, I think how can we best use the technology to document the survivors' stories? I think it's very important, specifically because we were also discussing, this is interesting also because we were discussing in the pre-events around memory and how do we keep our memories and these digital spaces, and how do we really talk about, can I speak to Galila, please? Hi, thank you. Sorry, because she was the, okay. So we were discussing about that, and one of the things that we have known in the Ethiopian history is that we keep on forgetting what has happened just before. I think the country has moved from the horrible genocidal war 2 years ago to almost like we are okay now. And there is an active state project that really prides on hiding and sidelining and invisibilizing these stories. I have seen some of the stories of documentations of survivors, and then their stories of specifically sexual violences and raping of Tigrayan women from the Eritrean and the Defense Force side, and there has been, their story has been coming out. And often, if it was not for the human rights organizations outside of the country, I don't think these stories would have come forward. And there is also a credit to give here for the Tigrayans advocates and activists who have been working extensively around reporting the issues from the get-go, even though they were saying, being attacked, misinformation, disinformation, not only that, but also online attack physically, continuously, or even when they go out for a protest. But they have been documenting that too. But what I'm seeing now is also trying to show about the resilience of the Tigrayan woman. And one of the places where I saw was when we had the Ashanda celebration, which was, for those of you who don't know, in Ethiopia, the northern part has a time, I don't remember the exact time of the year, but there is, just a few months ago actually, there is a celebration called Ashanda where the women come out and dance and celebrate the life and all that. And that incident was used to talk about the pain that Tigrayan women have suffered from because of the war, but at the same time their resilience and how cultural practices have used, somehow used to assert themselves as a Tigrayan, but also to say like, we are still here and we are surviving. And this is also, I've been following it, the stories, but these are like not really kept in one place, as you were saying, like, can we not forget this? And we have seen it with the other regime too. Forgetting is our perfect, our top-notch practice in Ethiopia. We do forget a lot. And I think that's very good. Not only the victim side, but also the survivors. But I think here, technology would be like collaborating with technicians, like the developers, website and others, to make it a very secured place, to make it a feminist space where stories are categorized in a very protective way. Because I think also another problem is that in our culture, one of the things I was also doing a little bit research on the IDP side, the women don't want to come out and say like, I'm a rape victim, because after that your life is over. Nobody is talking to you, even though you are a rape. So they try to keep it to themselves, which then leads to that if we are doing the work of survivors and then putting it online, we have to make sure that they are hidden in some ways. So that delicate work needs a little bit attention from a person or an organization or a collective that is very much intentional in the ways in which they work. I have seen Setawit had a documentary. I did not see it because I have had my own issue with the Setawit. But again, there is something that is happening, and I hope that it grows that way. And then your second question is about hierarchies of human rights. I find this very interesting because it's not only for Ethiopia, but also I think in the African continent too. We talk about access gap. We talk about gendered access, gender division. We also talk about meaningful access and all that. Sometimes we forget that technology does meet us in a very different ways. So for the people who are not connected completely, who have not even, connection is a luxury, not have a water, not have electricity, and you are already in war, for a war that you have no idea even which party, what, no, we're just being bombed. But technology met Tigrayans with drone. That is AI, top-notch, upcoming technology. They made it with, something about, when people talk about hierarchy of human rights, for me, like, what do you mean? You make it like exclusively, some people are not connected at all, hence they have no idea of technology, but some people are. But actually in the lived experience, if you look at it, we do meet technology in different ways. And so I want to challenge that discoursing, like, but at the same time I hear you, there are cases where some of us have taken to a court about sexual harassment, TFGBB, or what leads to killing of stuff. The judiciary system still needs, similar to what Shamiso was saying, they don't have the language in itself. And so that there needs to be some training around there, around not only to take it seriously as a crime, but also to understand the extent of the damage that is happening here. So that part is also very important. And I think it's our work, and I'm hoping that the NGOs there should be invested in that kind of like working around the judiciary system so that they can also hold the space for the victims and survivors. So that's the other one. The IDP side, it's interesting you mentioned the IDP side, because yesterday we were reading a story about a kid, a 1 year and 2 months kid being bitten by a hyena from the IDPs, because the IDPs are not really protected. And this woman, his mother, yeah, I sorry. See, speaking with my internal language, sorry. So IDP means internally displaced people. And the internal displacement happens because of the war in the northern side of Ethiopia. And the internal displacement is not only for Tigrayan women, also they are Amara women, different ethnic groups. Some of the people who lived in the IDPs, in this displaced places, have lived there for over 4 years. This mother now have been living there for 4 years. She had a child, he is 1 year and 2 months. Just yesterday, he was eaten by a hyena. And for me, it was a most horrible thing to sit with. And when we were doing a work with Messier to go there and to talk about the rape issues in there, I remember one of I was reading the interview that we have done with women. We were discussing with women about rape cases, and they were not really willing to talk to us because they were thinking that I will be ashamed for whatever I have survived, from whatever I have come from. Even to tell you stories of survival was a problem. But what happened then is when we were discussing, one woman, I remember being very angry. I can listen to her voice saying, like, I do not understand you NGO people. I don't know what your agendas are. She says, here, I don't have food. I don't have clean water. You come with your pad. Because your project is about sanitary. It's about women having it's not that it's not a good thing, but your priorities are in many ways really messed up, that you come and talk to me about pad. I don't care about bleeding. I might not even bleed because I'm not even eating. And I'm worried about my kids. So the mismatch issues is there. So I'm also very much, like, I have been, in many places I've been having this critical conversation with people who wants to do digital storytelling with IDP people. I think, why do you do that? Like, what is it about? Is it about your project? Or what is this about? TFGBB, like, what does it mean for these people? Let's connect and tell your story. What is that? So our priorities are in many ways very, very messed up, and also not reading a room or a context, really. And I think it's also the problem. That's why feminists oftentimes we talk about, can we do regional analysis? Can we talk about TFGB from a completely different things? I've been saying this for, I don't know, I think for 2 years since the war started. I keep saying, for me, whenever you talk about TFGBB, I don't think of only harassment, doxing. I think about bombing, because that's my experience. That's what I know. That's what I have been recording too. And so that kind of thinking has to be there. So to have a conversation with this woman would be about their experience of the war, and then how the drones were actually happening around them. That would be one of the work I could do. I want to finish, sorry. And then I want to close up by saying, I want to go back to Shina's provocation here around what are we responsible for? And then how are we implicated in the conversations of misinformation, disinformation, or even TFGBB? And then in here, I want to think about, like, it has been such a struggle for Kenyan, Sudanese, Ethiopian, DRC feminists to really have a room, even within our organizations, have a presence of a case that we have sitting with, because whose pain, whose experience need to be seen is always prioritized in different places, specifically when it's a geopolitical conversation. And I think that needs to be thrown back to NGOs to say, like, why do you prioritize between spaces? And what does it mean when you do, uplift one or selectively become very outrageous? What does that mean? And I think I want to give that back and then think about, like, where are we located regionally? What are we working on? Who are we excluding? Because that was the question also there. To what extent are we inclusive when it comes to human rights conversation in the continent? Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tigist, and thank you everyone for making it to this session. We've had a very good conversation, and when you go on the on the gender, you can look up the organization that they all work for because they have lots of resources on gender disinformation. Zaituni and Avis mentioned that they're documenting some cases. We mentioned and say that it's important that we document, so you can go look them up. And for APC, we have very many resources on this. You can also go on www.apc.org and find lots of resources. Let's share these available knowledge, available information that we have, because we ask where should we start from. So some people have already started these conversations. Some people have already started actions towards countering gender disinformation. So let's learn from what exists already as we think about starting something from where we are. So I want us to give a very special thank you to our interpreters, the sign language, and for thanking them for joining. I forgot her name. We are happy that you started to Google. I know this inclusion happens. Sorry? Toini, yes, a beautiful name. Yes, it's really good to have you in the room. Be in the room, be in the conversation, and speak up whenever you have an opportunity. It's something that we keep reminding ourselves that we should make it inclusive. So happy to see you, and thank you all. Go for the break and for the next session.